I'm going to try this. Convince me that Marxism is what we need to achieve. Maybe this is where I need to learn about Marxism. It's just through ChatGPT. Promotes international solidarity and cooperation. Under capitalism, countries are often in competition with each other, leading to conflict and exploitation. Yeah. In a socialist or communist system, countries would work together for the common good rather than trying to outdo each other for the benefit of the few. Dude, hell yeah. Let's see this. Argue against Marxism. There are several arguments that have been made against Marxism. The economic efficiency of socialism has been called into question. In a socialist system, the government plays a central role in the economy and makes decisions about what to produce and how to distribute resources. This can lead to inefficiencies and shortages, as the government may not have the same incentives. Yeah, I actually do partially agree with this statement. The government may not have the same incentives or knowledge as market actors to make the best economic decisions. To an extent, I agree with this, that it could be a potential issue with socialism that can be overcome. I do think it can be overcome. AI could fix that, though? Exactly. I do think these issues can be overcome. And especially when you account for something like AI. I don't even think you necessarily need AI. I think Chile wanted to do that before the coup. Yeah, you and I may have talked about this. It was Project like Cyberdyne or something. Cybersign. And this was in the fucking 70s. Imagine what we could do today. It's one of those things where like profit is an issue. I do believe that. Such as like supply and demand makes sense to me to an extent. Now, obviously, like I said, it can lead to unthinkable amounts of exploitation. That is a real problem. But the very notion of supply and demand can have positives. So I do partially agree with this, and I do partially agree with you that this can be managed. The history of socialist communist regimes has been marred by authoritarianism and human rights abuses. This is also technically true. However, I don't think this is necessarily tied to socialism or communism themselves. When you look at just like what socialism and communism are, I don't think they necessarily lead to authoritarianism and human rights abuses. It's just like, and the other thing is like, okay, what about capitalism? Capitalism also can result, and often does, usually does, result in authoritarianism and human rights abuses. In many cases, socialist or communist governments have suppressed political opposition. True, but so have capitalist governments, right? Suppressed individual freedoms. True, but so have capitalist governments. And committed widespread human rights abuses. True, but so have capitalist systems. Like, you know what I mean? This has led some to argue that Marxism is incompatible with democracy and individual liberty. Isn't Marxism, like, and socialism about expanding democracy and, like, introducing democracy into more aspects of our society, i.e. our workplaces? These things have happened under communist and socialist governments. That is, I think that's an irrefutable fact. But I personally don't think it's tied to socialism and communism on its own. Marxist theory has been criticized for being overly deterministic and not taking into account the complexity of human societies. That's an interesting point. That I kind of agree that, like, to achieve Marxism, it would require us to overcome a lot of the, you know, I don't know how you describe it, like animalistic aspects of human nature. But again, this is something I think we can overcome. According to Marxist theory, the course of history is determined by economic factors, and the class struggle is the driving force behind social change. I agree with that. However, many argue that there are many other factors at play in social and political change, and that human agency and individual choices play a significant role in shaping the course of history. Yeah, I disagree. This is where I side with the Marxists. Some argue that the collapse of socialist and communist regimes in the 20th century is evidence that Marxism is a failed ideology. The collapse of socialist and communist regimes in the 20th century, I don't think is related to Marxism being a failed ideology. Like, there are so many factors about why those regimes in the 20th century failed, including, like, capitalist countries, like we just talked about Chile. including capitalist countries like the US, putting their thumb on the scales to ruin those budding socialist regimes. Like Chile's the prime example of that. They had a well-functioning, from what I can tell, a well-functioning socialist economic system that the U.S. came and completely destroyed.